Or how would you like to see your circumstances change? How would you like to strengthen your values in 2024? How are you going to be branding yourself and or your business in 2024? We're connecting now with Professor Kobi Mensah, Associate Professor, Political Marketing and Branding at the University of Ghana Business School. I believe he joins us now on Zoom, and we're going to be talking about presenting the best version of yourself and or your business in the year 2024. Prof, hello, good morning to you.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I hope you're having an energetic start to 2024.
Well, absolutely. We're looking forward to a very positive year.
Very necessary.
2023, I think, was a good year. I'm sure for most of us.
Well, that's Prof, I was going to say that's very subjective. 2023 for some of us was fairly turbulent in parts, as far as especially the economy was concerned and our personal pockets were concerned. And for us here at 3FM, that's why we're embarking on this type of knowledge sharing expedition to make sure that we're putting our best foots forward in 2024.
Absolutely. I can agree with you on that. Some people had it very challenging. But of course, we look positive towards the new year.
Absolutely.
I'm sure, we're looking forward to it.
Well, we're turning our attention to branding this morning. And what better time than the start of a new year to sort of rearrange your thoughts and decide what your core values are, what it is that you want the world to perceive of you and or your business. We talk about branding. We hear it often times in conversation, on the news, in the media. Branding. What exactly are we talking about? What are we referring to when we talk about branding? Somebody will say, what is your brand? What do they mean?
Absolutely. Well, for us marketers, when we talk about branding, we mean two sides of a coin. Firstly, you must understand what we call, brand identity. And secondly, what we call brand image. These are two different things, but sometimes people use them interchangeably. When we talk about brand identity, it is almost like when your parents have actually given birth to you as a baby. They give you what we call identity. Obviously, some of the identities are actually natural, so you come with it. Obviously, your body features, you are born with it. Along the line, there could be some kind of changes as opposed to what you came with. People obviously applying, these what do you call the creams, etc. Your hair, everything else could actually change, but naturally, you come with some kind of features. And again, your parents actually fosters on you, or they foster on you, some kind of identities. For example, your name is given to you by a parent. Clearly, they mold you, they shape you in terms of the association that they sort of take you around in terms of, going to church, going to school, going to the mosques, etc. All those things are the sort of identities that your parents actually foster on you, growing up. Don't forget, you have been named after someone. Most of the time, they are naming you after their parents, their own parents, or themselves. They're naming you after your grandparent, for example. And they are raising you in that hue of the person that they named you after. So for brand identity, we're looking at the internal factors that actually come to be associated with a human being, for example. Now, as you interact with the society, at school, at mosques or in church, at, religious places, at social gathering, people are also forming opinions about you. And that's what we call brand image.
Okay.
Now, most of the time, we like to have an alignment between the brand identity and the brand image, i.e., what your parents want you to become, or the kind of person that they named you after, which they wish that you take their characteristics. When the outside world, i.e., your friends, your school teachers, your mates at church or at mosque, etc., when they see you in that light as to how your parents want you to be seen, then we say that there's an alignment between the brand identity and the brand image. That's where you assume that equity, that your parents are actually looking for. And so we always say as marketers that when the company has actually bestowed on the product a logo, a certain, font types, a certain strap line, which we call the brand value, or what we call the what's the word again? Well, we call it strap line, but some people would call it, other names just escaped me. I would remember.
Sure.
Now, so when all these things tie together, then of course, you have achieved actually the purpose. Now, when there's a misalignment, it means that there must be a certain activity, which we call the marketing activity. So you have to do advertisement, you have to do maybe PR, you have to do so many other activities in order that there could be alignment. If there's a misalignment, or the identity and the image are not kind of reflecting each other, then it means you have to revisit your marketing activities in order that you could actually achieve the alignment. So that's what we talk about, a branding from marketing perspective. Obviously, as a human being, the same thing happens, as I gave the example.
Right.
If you realize that there's a misalignment between the identity that maybe you want to be seen as, or your parents want to be seen as, there's a misalignment between that and the image that is what people are seeing you, then you have to go back to the drawing board to look at what have you missed in order that you could actually put it together for that alignment to actually happen.
Okay, so on an individual level, I think that sets the foundation clearly for us. Now, if we were to take this to the business level, what are the key elements businesses should focus on if they want to create a compelling and a memorable brand identity? Because there are many businesses out there, many different brands out there. How does a business then create a brand that is not forgettable?
Fantastic. I mean, firstly, every company or business entity has what we call a product. You do not have a brand yet until that product is actually known by the target audience.
Right.
I always tell people that you don't have a brand until somebody can recognize it. Don't forget, in branding, we'll talk about, as I mentioned, the brand identity and brand image. Again, if you have developed a product and people don't know it, you couldn't say that it's a brand. It's a product. Now, you then have to, kind of foster on the product a number of things. So, for example, you create a logo, you have your strap line or your value proposition, yeah? So if you say that you are in the courier business and you call it maybe you're using characteristics like dependability, for example. Now, that dependability becomes part of your value proposition in terms of your strapline. So when you say a dependable partner, it means that the activities that you would do and how people will reach you, you must actually do exactly that as a dependable partner. So when somebody phones you, the phone should not ring more than twice. Immediately they ring, immediately you pick up and you say, hello, so-and-so courier, how can I help you? If somebody gives you their goods to deliver and you say that it's going to be on time at 9 o'clock, it has to be 9 o'clock. Now, once you're doing these activities and then it's reflecting on the value proposition, you are creating a brand image. All right. And so you actually get into what we call the brand status. So you have to have identifiable colors. So if you're, if you're a company and you have identified your target audience, don't forget all these things must be done in the perspective of the target audience, not what you want. Of course, what you want goes into the identity, but you have to understand that you are actually doing that for a certain target people. That's why you are in the business, all right? So firstly, you have to identify your target market, and then you ask yourself, this particular target market, what kind of colors would actually, would they prefer? What kind of colors would actually suit them? Now, once you actually, get to know that, or sometimes You will not get to know that until you do a research. So you put the colors that you suspect that people would want together, plenty other colors, and then you do a research. Now, research doesn't mean that you have to do a very big thing. You can actually solicit ideas from your friends, from your relatives, from other people, your acquaintances, etc., and ask them. That is people who you think are within the catchment area or within the target audience, right? Now you seek their views and ask them, which color do you think would fit this particular business or would fit this particular product? And they go, oh, I think color red is fine. Oh, color blue is fine. No, you gather these opinions, and then you choose, which of the color is dominant. All right. And then, of course, you go with a logo as well. You can sample opinions and get the logo done. And then you have your strap line, some few words, you string them together, ask people which of them did they think is catchy, which of them did they think actually portrays the business that you're doing. They choose one, and then you actually emboss it on your what do you call your logo, and then you develop your leaflets, for example. You start sharing it among the target audience, all right? And then over the period, people become very familiar, with that particular product. Now, if you do a research, again, amongst this target audience, and quite a number of people can identify you, i.e., you just give them the logo and say, which company or which business do you think actually has this logo? And they go, oh, 3FM. Wow. Then it means that you are achieving what we call the brand image, all right? Then it means that we're getting to the brand status. When you say, okay, 3FM, what did they do? Because you see, there's something what we call awareness, and then we have interest, all right? Now, people can be, what do you call, aware of the brand, all right? In terms of knowing that this is what do you call TV3 or this is 3FM, for example. But they must also know what you do, which means that you've gone beyond just what we call environmental exposure to what we call cognitive exposure in terms of awareness, because there's different parts of awareness.
Right.
So when you ask the person, oh, which logo is this? You say, oh, 3FM, I know. Okay, what do they do? They're a radio station, all right? What are they popularly known for? They talk about current affairs, or they talk about entertainment, etc. Then you know that you have arrived in terms of branding, all right? So don't create a product and think that it's a brand. It's not a brand. You need to do other activities to grow it into a brand status.
Well, this is all very exciting, Prof. Marketing 101, talking about identifiable colors, getting your logo, and also a strap line. So you might have a product, but do you have a brand? Also talking about awareness versus interest. Are people aware of your brand? That's on one side. And are they interested in said brand? Now, we are, in the throes of technological advancement, and day in, day out, we're seeing new apps coming. The younger generation, the Gen Zs, they're on apps such as TikTok, and everybody wants to be adaptable. They want to be cool, if you will. For a brand forecasting into 2024, how do they balance consistency and adaptability? So you have a solid brand, for example, maybe you've been selling bread for a number of years. Everybody knows your logo, your colors, your strapline. Maybe your strapline is fresh every day, for example. But you know that the younger audiences are on social media and the like, and maybe you too want to be adaptable. How does a business do that without losing their identity and losing their consistency?
Absolutely. Now, you must know that you are not an island, even when your brand is so popular and so established. You talk about the Unilevers, etc. They didn't just do that by sitting there, all right? So you've got to follow the trends. You've got to follow your customers and know where they're going, all right? I said it is not about what you want. It's about what your customers are looking for, who they are, etc. All right. So firstly, you have to be out there. You need to be following your customers' taste. You need to be following what they're doing. You need to be aware of what they're doing. So even if you're not Gen Z and you're very like my age, which we call, is it Generation X or
Oh, I was going to say, they say old youth. They call something old youth.
exactly. Now you couldn't say that because you're old age or something you were not following, because your product is meant for that particular category. So you've got to
Right.
be out there. We normally say that as marketers, as I said earlier, we normally say that you have to do research, but research doesn't mean that you're commissioning a very huge project. It's
Right.
about observation. You have to be observing almost every time. You've got to be on those platforms. If they're on TikTok, you've got to be on TikTok. You've got to be in Instagram. You probably may not be passing too much comment, but your observation must be top notch. All right. Sometimes if you're not able to do that, then of course you're supposed to recruit somebody who could actually be having that observation for you. And so when your generation is far off from other generations, then of course you have to be recruiting people who are within that particular generation,
right,
who can actually give you those insights, so that you do not actually be out of touch, with your customers. So clearly, how to keep up is for you to observe more by doing research or just a casual observation, and then incorporating, those trends into your product or into your brand. Don't forget that sometimes you have your tradition. The tradition has actually served you well.
That's right.
You've got to investigate and find out, how do you tweak the tradition in a manner that it doesn't lose the brand essence. Brand essence is when you have actually specified why customers, must stick with you. Now, that's the brand essence. So over the period, they have actually stuck with you, for some time. But don't forget, the customers are changing. New ones are coming in. If you take a typical example of Key Soap, right?
Right.
You said the tradition continues.
That's right.
The tradition. So Key Soap is every day aware of the changes that parents are coming through, getting to grandchildren, etc. How do they follow that particular sequence so that they can still be relevant? Even if those they started with are not there. That's the kind of behavior a product or a brand must have in order that you can keep your relevance. So you can have the tradition, but tweak in a manner that it fits into the modern generation, so that you don't lose touch. You keep your essence, and then you are still trendy in that sense.
Now, in a crowded market, how can a business effectively differentiate themselves from competitors?
Great. Now, as I said, differentiation, comes in many forms. Of course, we'll talk about, if you take a typical, brand, I think in marketing concepts or in marketing theory, there's what we call the brand pyramid. All right. The brand pyramid actually gives you certain markers, that you can use to manage the brand. The first is about, your product attributes and the features. All right. So key about, differentiation is knowing what features or what attributes do the competitors have, and what attributes do you have. Now, these attributes should not be just there. They should actually reflect on the needs and the interest of the customer, because that's the point. That's the reason why you're in the market. So you cannot just come out with an attribute and think that, because a competitor has attribute A or feature A and B, I'm going to have a feature A or B. No, you have to have those attributes reflecting on the needs and the interest of the target customer, but also differentiated or, set apart from that of the competitor. All right. So that's the first instance to creating, a difference in a very competitive market. Now, the next is about your functional benefits. All right. Every product is meant for something. All right. Either it's cooling your thirst, or it's actually quenching your thirst,
right,
or it's actually giving a certain appetite, or it's making you excited, or it's supposed to put you in a particular mood. If you take a typical, generic product like music, right? Some music are high life; they are supposed to be danceable.
That's
Others
right.
are supposed to give you a certain mood, isn't it? Some of them are supposed to reflect on sadness, so that you can actually put in a memory, the reality of life, because life is not all about, happiness. All right. And so you have to actually look at the brand's functionality. What function does your brand actually perform? Now, that has to be set different from other brands. So if somebody's brand is high life and makes you dance, somebody's brand is supposed to make you reflect on realities of life, all right? And so you also determine, that some people also want to be reflecting on the realities of life. So not everybody wants to be out there jumping around.
Right.
So you also create that particular genre so that you could actually set yourself apart from the one who's actually, creating a jumping music. And then, of course, we'll talk about the emotional benefits, all right? Apart from the functionality, there is also the kind of, feel that your brand is supposed to get people have or make people have, all right?
Right.
So sometimes, some people want to be, in a very somber mood, all right? They feel, a different kind of, vibe when they actually entertain or when they consume your brand, from others. Then, of course, we have the persona, all right? So the persona is about creating, a reflection of who the customer is. There's a popular concept in marketing that we ask. We said, if this product was a person or were to be a person, which kind of person do you think they would be, for example? So you put a Mercedes-Benz, and then we ask you, what kind of person do you think, if this car were to be a human being, would be? Then you would say a rich man, for example, a rich woman, a CEO, that kind of thing, all right?
Yeah.
So you create a brand persona. Every brand has a persona. If you do not have a persona, it will be difficult for people to recall you. Right?
Okay.
Because people should be able to say that, oh, I know Osumesi, this is the kind of person they are. That's a persona.
Right.
So your brand must reflect the persona of the target market or the target customer. All right. And then, of course, we have what we call the brand essence. After all, what does your brand stand for? All right. Does it stand for maybe a good causes? Or does it stand for maybe humanity? Does it stand for love? Does it stand for whatever that, the philosophy of the brand, if I should put it that way, i.e. the essence of the brand. After all said and done, what is the human character, or what is the essence of your brand, the philosophy of your brand? Then you can actually determine it. So these things would set yourself set yourself apart from the competition. In a very crowded, competitive world, you need to determine these things so that you can promote them and they would set it, apart from your competitor.
Now, Prof, what about a business that is looking to rebrand? So let's say in 2023, things didn't go according to plan. For example, there were some hiccups in terms of productivity, in terms of profitability, and the brand thinks, maybe I want to pivot and go in a different direction. What advice would you have for a business that is looking to maybe have a do-over, start afresh, rebrand?
Okay, thank you. Now, we rebrand with a caution, and as marketers, rebranding is a very big issue for us. It is not as simple as because it costs a lot of money. When you say you are rebranding, it is almost like you are if I should use a modern parlance, you are converting from a man to a woman.
I see.
It's a huge
that's an uphill battle.
Absolutely. I mean, rebranding in marketing is a huge thing because you're changing completely. I mean, there are things that we can do to reposition the brand, not necessarily rebranding. Of course, rebranding includes reposition as well. And so sometimes you can use just communication, the communication tools to sort of reposition yourself, or to actually get a little oomph into your branding, but not necessarily rebranded. But if we want to rebrand, that's a very huge issue.
Okay.
First of all, you need to actually do what we call the positioning map. You have to go into the market, take the attributes of other competitors and yours, and then ask the customer where do they think you are on the attribute scale. So when you give them the positioning map and then you tell them to indicate where you are actually getting that feedback to examine in your books where you thought you are. And then you can see the difference. Once you see the difference, then you can convince yourself that indeed you need a certain repositioning. Then the question is, does the repositioning call for a rebranding or call for other marketing activities that you must do in order that repositioning can happen? Don't forget that we have what we call our popular 4 Ps, right? Every marketer must know that. And if you're not a marketer, but you're in a business, you must definitely know what 4 Ps are.
Okay, so you break down the 4 Ps for us.
Excellent. We'll talk about the product or the service.
The product. Okay.
The product. The second one is your pricing.
Your pricing, yes.
The third one is your promotion.
Promotion.
And then the fourth one is your place, which is the distribution. This is the basic one. Of course, we can go on to what we call the extended piece, which is the 7. Some people talk about 14 Ps, etc. But at least the basic 4 Ps is good for everybody, right? Now, so when you are repositioning, you're asking yourself in terms of product, what must you do? Must you just change, a certain flavor, or must you just change a certain, attribute? Now, product, for example, we have 3 levels of product. We have the core product, we have the what we call the actual product, and we have what we call the augmented product. Sometimes the changes must be in the core product, i.e., the sort of the ingredient, right? So if you take water, for example, bottled water, the element water itself, the fluid, is what we call the core product. All right. The actual product includes the bottle or the container that actually helps you to hold the water. All right. And then the augmented product is your warranties and your guarantees that you give to the product, your after-sales services that you give to the product. All right. So sometimes you do not necessarily have to do a rebranding, but a certain, policy, a warranty or a guarantee might reposition the product for you. All right. So you have to actually be aware of that. Sometimes it's your pricing. Maybe you are charging upfront fees. Right. Can it be possible for you not to charge upfront fees, but then charge after use, which can actually enhance people's likeness for the product? All right. Sometimes it's your distribution, where you are distributing it. All right. You're actually distributing in the wrong market. You're not actually placing it at the appropriate places. All right. So you got to change your location of distribution, or you have to change your distribution network. Sometimes it's your, a promotion. Maybe you are using TV instead of maybe using radio, for example. So you must actually do all these analysis in order to come to terms that indeed, you were doing the wrong things. And as I said, when you do the positioning mapping, all right, against competitors, in the perspective of customers, you would be able to identify what activity you must do, whether you must go for overhaul, which is rebranded, or you must just do certain things to reposition the product.
Okay, so you talk about maybe instead of doing a whole rebranding or an overhaul, maybe a repositioning. So what about in times of crisis? How would you guide a business to maintain a positive brand image and rebuild trust? Because with any business, there'll be peaks and troughs. And if there are any mistakes that have been made along the way, what advice would you give to make sure that customers return even after a mishap?
Absolutely. Now, that's a very important question, and I think that in our environment, it is very good to address this issue. People create multiple products or multiple businesses, and sometimes when they create the businesses, they name them or they try to, foster certain brands, certain characteristics on them according to how they feel. Now, in branding, we have brand architecture is the way that you align your brands if you have multiple, products or you have multiple businesses. So a typical example is, and I'll give you a foreign one, so I'm not controversial. If you take Richard Branson, right?
That's right.
Richard Branson, which is Virgin Atlantic, has actually what we call branded house. So it means that they take the parent brand, which is the Virgin, and then spread it across all the business interests. So you have Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Cola, Virgin Music, etc. Right?
That's right.
The same way when you take Unilever, they have that particular brand architecture where the parent brand actually becomes the driver of all the brands. So the equity of the parent brand is actually expressed on the sub-brands in order that they could actually perform. Now, in that case, the sub-brands actually performing in the hue of the parent brand, believing that the equity of the parent brand, once you know that Virgin Atlantic is a very good product, it actually gives you a very good, functionality or value. Whenever you see a Virgin Cola, you actually endorse it or you transfer the goodwill onto the Virgin Cola because you know the Virgin brand, right? That's a very good one in the market that is not turbulent, all right? In our market, which is a very turbulent market, that could be a very risky, approach for you.
Right.
Because, in markets that are very unpredictable, you do not want to do, a branded house, unless, of
Right.
course, they're very established, And so you do what the Procter & Gamble, P&G is also like a Unilever. Most people don't know P&G because of the brand strategy they have. Now, they do house of brands. So they do not use the parent brand across their sub-brands.
Right.
They name the brands individually. So you have what we call Peso. Peso is a soap powder, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have Ariel. People don't know that these two brands actually belong to the same company.
In fact, I didn't know that up until just this moment.
Exactly. So Peso and Ariel belongs to P&G, Procter & Gamble, but you would never know. And so when there's a crisis, for one, it does not affect the other. So
Right.
the company is stable, all right? And so in a very critical market like ours, I always say that you want to do a house of brands as opposed to a branded house because our market is highly unpredictable. Now, so that is one to actually offset crisis. So right from the word go, if you want to avoid crisis, in a market like ours, do not link your brand to a parent brand. Otherwise, when something happens, it goes like a dynamo. It hits everybody else, in the brand family. And then you experience that. Now, apart from that, every brand must have a crisis, what you call strategy, communication strategy. For example, having a dark web, for example, a dark web is what you have your website, right?
That's right.
Now, the website that you have, you must have a dark web at the back of it. That dark web has all the PR, information as to how to navigate, the brand. So, for example, when crisis hit, who do you call first? Right. What are the activities you're going to do? Who is in charge of what communication, etc. You put all these things there. So immediately the crisis hit, you draw down your usual or your normal web that actually does your day-to-day communication, and then you push on your dark web. Immediately people have contact for what do you call the various contact that people need to, whether the media, whether the interested families, etc. If you're a small business, you can still do the same thing. You need to establish, because when crisis hit, you might not be the right person to speak to because you'll be emotional, all right?
Right.
Now, who would be able to speak on your behalf that has enough insight to really address the issue? Most people want to speak by themselves, but then you're the wrong person. You need to have someone who can be in control because they're not emotionally, attached to the story, so that they can give the real fact. Now, do not try to escape, the real fact. Sometimes you are likely to think that by giving the fact, you would, sort of, crucify yourself. No, make sure that you are not evasive. Make sure that you are giving the fact as possible, because honesty is one of the best ways to sell brands. People will see that you've been honest, you've been credible, and as a result, they will return. But of course, take ownership. All right, make sure that you are taking ownership. You're not, kind of transferring blames to everybody else, but making sure that you're taking ownership and you're promising that you put it right, where you can. And then I'm sure that customers will come back. But it depends on what crisis we're talking about. There could be so many other types of crises that you must, be aware of. And that's why simulation is very important for brands, all right?
Okay.
From time to time, you've got to simulate, crisis. but you are not simulating the crisis just because you're doing so. You are aware of the market. You are aware of what crisis can hit you, all right? Because there had been trends, there had been instances in the past. So you use those ones to simulate so that when the crisis hit, you'll be able to actually address them. There could be differences in it. Of course, you cannot have it exactly as it's simulated, but at least you are ready to ensure that you could actually deal with some of them, and others you could sort of manage them as they come based on the dynamics. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we can park it for the individual and business branding strategy, but the year is 2024. It's an election year, and of course political parties will also be looking to put their best foot forward and market themselves positively as they attempt to gain votes. How can political parties effectively convey their core values and messages to connect with voters? We're seeing a rise in the use of social media, apps such as TikTok and the rest. Even the parties are getting hip to social media. But beyond that, what should the parties be thinking about as far as their branding is concerned? Because it absolutely concerns them, marketing strategy, especially at a time like this.
Absolutely. Well, that's my baby, right? That's exactly my area of expertise.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I eased you into it. I don't know if you knew we were coming to this destination.
I realized that, I think that if people recall in 2000 elections, those of you who are very young, the Gen Zs, you might not know, but in 2000, the MPP, for example, came up with a very different kind of approach to political campaigning. And that's where my interest started. So when I did my PhD, when I did my master's, I took on that particular area. It was not heard of in Ghana when we talk about political marketing. And then later on, over the period of advocacy, I think it's caught on now. Now, when you look at the 2000, which is my base case study,
right?
All right. Now, the Kufuor's campaign actually did a branding that was on 3 levels, all right? The candidate branding, the policy branding, and the party branding. Of course, you could say that the party branding had been the tradition, all right? Now, it wasn't so much of a candidate branding. We hadn't really branded candidates as we did in 2000. So Jacob Echebilamte of blessed memory, when I used to speak to him, actually talk about the deliberateness into what they call the gentle giant. It was deliberate to create a persona, for J.H. Kufuor.
Right.
Of course, you wouldn't, J. Kufuor, sorry, not H. J. Kufuor. Of course, you wouldn't say that Atta Mills wasn't a giant, it wasn't a gentle. They were the same character, but they used communication to actually frame J. Kufuor different from Atta Mills.
So, and Prof, not to slide tackle you, is that what you would call then the sort of the tagline or the strap line?
The strap line,
right?
Yes. So the candidate itself had a strap line, right, which is the gentle giant. Now they realized that they couldn't be effective in contrasting Kufuor with Atta Mills because they had similar characteristics, and that's the differentiation question that you asked about.
Right.
So they brought in former president, Rawlings, which could serve as a huge contrast for them because Rawlings was the opposite of Atta Mills and J. Kufuor, all right? He was very much outspoken, he was very dominant as a character, etc. And he was also a giant, okay? But they could easily contrast J. Kufuor with, Rawlings as opposed to with Atta Mills. So whenever they had talked about a gentle giant, they had deliberately said that, it would look different from Rawlings's era. But of course, J. Kufuor was not competing with Rawlings, he was competing with Atta Mills. So when they kept bringing these 2 names, and in branding, when you bring 2 names associated together, people tend to see that in that particular light. So people in their subconscious rather could see J. Kufuor vis-a-vis, or versus Rawlings as opposed to versus Atta Mills. So that was a very fantastic, branded, idea for political party. All right. Then they brought in the vice president as well, again, to contrast, how their kind of a campaign would be, and then make sure that they could use him as a link association to the voters of the North, and of course in the Zongos, etc. So they created that kind of a persona for Aliu Mahama as well. All right. Now the same thing that they did with their policy. Remember, they came up with what they call the positive change agenda. All right. Now we hadn't really branded policy in the past. All right. But in 2000, the MPP managed to brand policy in a manner that under the positive change agenda, we had 5 pillars underneath it, which was, the mass transport, the capitation grant, all those things that they actually did. Now we have what we call, the broadcast and the narrowcast messaging in political marketing. And so when they had the broadcast messaging, which was the positive change agenda, they had a narrowcast messaging underneath them. So people could immediately visualize the campaign very easily.
Right.
And they brought this song, J.H. Kufuor, a gentleman with a vision and a mission. And they all came together in one. So when I was doing my PhD, I remember sitting in Parliament and asking the former President Mahama. I interviewed him as well for my PhD, and I asked him about that particular campaign, and he told me, look, it was one of the most insightful campaign ever, and he was telling me about the instances where his colleagues, that is when he was in Parliament, somebody would say, look, you'll be in the bath, and then the song will just come into your ear. And then you pierce yourself and he says, don't sing it, right? and then you stop singing it. You get to, your hall, or you get to your room, and then you hear your son or your daughter singing that song. And then you get, hey, shut up, That is how powerful that particular branding was.
Right.
Piecing together all these things in one song, in terms of the candidate branding, the policy branded, and the party's own branded. That's so powerful. So, first of all, the political parties must identify their values are in at least the three P's: the presidential candidate, the party, and the policy. Sometimes, other people other than these three could also be of value to you, of what do you call equity to you. For example, former President, Kufuor's wife of blessed memory, was very instrumental, and in certain constituency, she was at the forefront as opposed to the candidate himself. All right. The same thing when we take Atta Mills' campaign. All right. Similar when they did what they call the door-to-door. All right. It was completely different from what we used to do. The retail, they call it the retail politics, all right?
Right.
That actually differentiated the NDC at a time from the MPP, and I think that they were just cracked. I think I cited a material from Gabi Ochedak, who was actually criticizing that strategy. In the end, it became a sharp contrast between the NDC campaign and the MPP campaign, and that retail politics then were carried on over the years, And so when you look at every instances, the political parties have branded themselves amazingly well. Now, in the 2020 election,
right,
the policy or the manifesto of the NDC became a very huge, a branding contrasting point. That is the People's Manifesto. Nobody doubts that was a differentiator, all right? Because it cuts straight through the voters, and it definitely sets apart the NDC from the MPP. So there are so many ways that political parties can actually brand themselves and look different. And I think that basically you can use the three P's of the party, the candidate, and then that is the presidential candidate, and the policy to brand yourself.
I see. All time check, it is some 6 minutes to the top of the hour, 9 a.m. You're still live here on 3FM, Sunrise on 3FM 92.7. We're joined on Zoom by Professor Kobi Mensah, Associate Professor, Political Marketing and Branding, University of Ghana Business School. We're talking about presenting the best version of yourself and or your business, and also getting some insight into how political parties should be marketing or branding the units ahead of 2024. 2024. We're looking to wrap up in about 2 minutes. But Prof, I do have another question as we stick with the theme of political parties and their marketing efforts in 2024. Now, in a contentious political environment, how would you advise parties to maintain a positive tone and avoid negativity? Because we talk about crisis management and what the tone should be like, avoiding an emotional tone, being honest, being straightforward. What advice would you give as we wrap up on this conversation?
Okay, great question. Now, the political parties must understand that in marketing, we have what we call exchange of value, all right? Now, exchange of value means that what you have actually put together as a product, you're going to exchange it with someone's money, all right? Now, each of us are evaluating what we have to see whether there's a congruence. So whether your phone costs 100 cedis and I deem it as 100 cedis, because don't forget, the 100 cedis is also my sweat, all right? I've sweat for that 100 cedis. So I have to evaluate your phone and then my 100 cedis to come to a conclusion that there's a congruence, and then I exchange it. Now, when the politician had sat down to investigate what policies people need or would solve people's problems, they have expended energy, all right, in doing that. Now, when you're on radio and TV speaking, I am also supposed to stop whatever I'm doing to listen to you. I'm expending effort. I'm expending energy. I have stopped everything that I'm doing to listen to you. So the two of us are exchanging value, all right? Now, if you start shouting, if you start insulting at the studios, like our political parties, the communicators do, you are wasting my value, because I'm listening to you and then paying attention and trying to imbibe all that you're saying. And all that you can do is to shout, is to insult, but not to tell me what policies and things that you have that will better my life. You are not actually exchanging value. So for political parties to really understand that, whatever they're doing, they're exchanging value with the voter, they have to then stay positive to the message. You do not have to go about insulting or, criticizing all that. You have to, of course, there's a room for criticizing, but you have to ask yourself, if you take the messaging on the campaign trail as 100%, what percentage must you dedicate to criticizing your opponent? What percentage must you dedicate to talking about yourself? What percentage must you dedicate to addressing my need, my functional need as a voter? You must spell those out. So once you know that it's 40-40, 60, or 30-30, 60, or whatever percentage that you allocate, make sure that the greater chunk of that messaging percentage goes to addressing the voters' core need that you have identified and how you can better their lives. There's no point staying on criticizing or staying on insulting or staying on doing things that does not or do not actually reflect in the needs of the voter, because you are actually exchanging value both ways. So I think that when politicians, their communicators are aware of these, frameworks or these, principles in terms of political communication, they would be able to do a better job. I always say that there's no point in shouting at the studios. When your opponent is shouting, just stay quiet and tell them that with all due respect to voters, I would not descend into the gutters as you would. I would stay focused to communicate to the voter exactly what I would do for their lives. I think that would be positive.
Fantastic. Prof, thank you so much for your time this morning. What a conversation this has been.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for the insights you've given us on a personal, business, and political level. This has been quite the masterclass, and I know a part 2 is certainly loading.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.
You too. Have a fantastic day. Again, that was Professor Kobi Mensah, Associate Professor, Political Marketing and Branding at the University of Ghana Business School. And if you didn't have your notepad and your pen out, you're going to have to watch that playback, because he dropped a lot of gems, identifying your brand colors, your target market, your logo, your strapline, and that cuts across the personal, business, and even political political level. Time check, it is exactly 9 a.m. as the time reads in the studio. Still live here on 3FM Sunrise on 3FM 92.7. I've got a very, very special guest in the studio. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we talk some more.
When I need motivation, 3FM Sunrise is my queen, 'cause she stays strong. Yeah, yeah.